And welcome back to TVP World. You're watching News in Depth. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has secured a one-year exemption from U.S. oil sanctions following a White House meeting with Donald Trump, cementing a relationship that stretches beyond energy policy into political agreement. But Orban's true legacy may be the system he's built, centralized, loyalist, and resistant to change. Joining us on TVP World to explore the durability of Orbánism is Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World and a close observer of Central Europe's political shifts. Hello and welcome to News in Depth.
Hi, Ben.
So before we get things rolling, let's take a look at one of the announcements made by the Hungarian Prime Minister after having secured the deal. Let's take a look.
Issue for today to explain clearly what would be the consequences for the Hungarian people and for the Hungarian economy not to get oil and gas from Russia because we are supplied by pipelines. Pipeline is not an ideological or political issue, it's a physical reality because we don't have port, exactly as the President explained to you. So we will negotiate on that point. It's vital for us.
Now, a lot of people are saying that this excuse of kind of being geopolitically landlocked is not very much a valid one. But before we go on to that, Orban did leave Washington with the kind of win he needed. What do you think he gave up in return, and how does this change Hungary's kind of long-touted kind of energy dependency narrative?
Well, you're right. He got what he wanted. He got photo ops with Donald Trump in the Oval Office. They've got an election which is supposed to take place next April, and the appearance alongside Trump was planned by Fidesz for a while. So that's a big win, and also the sanctions relief that they got for just for 1 year. But still, Orban will take that back home as a huge win. What did it cost them? Actually, quite a lot. Orban committed to buying $600 million of liquid gas, LNG, and also a commitment to spend $1.5 billion, I think it was, on these uranium fuel rods, which he'll use in the PAX nuclear power plant that they've got in Hungary, and replace the Russian fuel that they use. And that kind of, especially the LNG, kind of reveals the contradiction in Orban's message that they're dependent on Russian oil, because how is that LNG going to arrive in Hungary? It'll have to arrive by ship. Both Trump and Orban were very keen to underline in Washington that Hungary is a landlocked country, so therefore they have to buy oil and gas from Russia, from the Turk Stream and the Friendship pipeline that come from Russia. So this LNG is going to come by ship. It'll probably be transshipped in a gas port in Croatia, and then pumped through a pipeline from Croatia. So it kind of damages the narrative.
All right, like I said, the LNG deal as well as the shift to U.S. nuclear fuel seems to contradict Orban's geography-based excuses. Is Hungary's energy dependence more of a political one than an actual physical one?
It looks that way. I mean, for the reasons that we just talked about, and also it's come out in the press in the last few days that Hungary's major oil company, MOL, which has refineries in Hungary and Slovakia, actually, in its third quarter report, wrote clearly that because of the sanctions, they may now have to diversify their oil supply through pipelines from Croatia. And even not so long ago, there's a kind of clean energy think tank based in Finland, which also said that Hungary can take oil from this Adria pipeline that comes from the Adriatic. At the moment, I think Hungary gets around 80% of its oil and 76% of its natural gas from Russia. That might be the other way around, but it's still very high. And that's actually gone up since Russia invaded. So they've definitely got room for manoeuvre. How much it costs is unclear. The Hungarian Orbán and Fidesz say that it'll cost a huge amount to the ordinary Hungarian user of gas. Other people say that there might be some initial cost of transferring from Russian gas to another source of gas because the refineries have to be adapted somehow, but that might just be a short-term cost. Yeah.
And looking at the political aspect of it, we also see that Hungary is still kind of sticking to a stance that is more antagonistic towards Ukraine when it comes to this war, whereas we already see Trump perhaps shifting their position a little bit. We do have an announcement and a soundbite by the Hungarian Prime Minister as well as US President, so let's take a look.
We are not unified because Brussels and the Europeans has a different approach to the war. So the only pro-peace government is the United States government and the small Hungary in Europe anyway. All the other governments prefer to continue the war because many of them think that Ukraine can win on the front line, which is a misunderstanding of the situation.
You would say that Ukraine cannot win that war.
You know, miracle can happen.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so there's actually plenty to unpack there with a very short span of time. The first thing that immediately popped into my mind is the rhetoric about Europeans wanting to keep that war going. And it's something that we see a lot of pro-Russian politicians have been parroting, and also this kind of rhetoric, even if giving him the benefit of the doubt that he seeing things more pragmatically. Do you think that this rhetoric risks kind of fracturing the unity within the European Union itself?
Well, maybe not fracturing the unity because it's already fractured. Hungary, since the start of the war, has been at odds with European Union's approach. Viktor Orbán sees Hungary as a plucky, brave, small country defending its sovereignty against the dark, oppressive colonial forces at its border. But that's not Russia, that's the European Union. He sees the European Union as pushing Hungary into a war that it doesn't want, and this kind of picks away at very painful wounds in Hungarian history. And Orban regularly talks about how the Austrians pushed Hungary into the First World War, and of course we know that it lost a lot of its territory in the Treaty of Trianon after the First World War. And then in the Second World War, even though Hungary was on the side of the Germans at the start, they eventually invaded and occupied Hungary, and then which led to the occupation by the Soviet Union. So this is a very kind of fertile material for propaganda that Orban can use. And it's interesting that now he paints the European Union as the successor in terms of totalitarianism and threat to Hungary rather than Russia. And he doesn't, and he rejects completely the idea that, for example, Hungarians fought a brave revolution against the Russians, and the Ukrainians are doing something similar. Of course, in very it's not a complete comparison, but there's something similar going on, and Orban rejects that comparison completely.
How effective do you think this narrative is within Hungary? We do know that a lot of the dialogue we're having looks like a foreign policy, but a lot of it is also for domestic consumption. You mentioned earlier that he's been picking away at these historical grievances. Do you think that that is the way how Hungarian people see it? Do you think that these means to divide is effective?
Yeah, it very much is, and we can see how his competitor now, Peter Magyar, is using those same fears. He was reported this morning, I think, in the Financial Times. His comments on Ukraine were that in terms of Ukrainian membership of the European Union, this must be decided by the Hungarian people, probably because he knows what the sentiments are in the country, and it means that if he comes into power, he doesn't have to make that difficult decision. He can kind of deflect it. Those forces exist, and any clever politician will want to use them.
Right. Speaking of Petr Medzhar, I do want to pivot into more domestic stuff. We're talking about today how even if Orban himself is being challenged politically, do you think that the opposition will be able to dismantle the system that he set up? Or, like you mentioned, a lot of these kind of politically expedient narratives will just continue? Well,
perhaps the narratives will continue, but the system for sure will endure. And it's correct that Petr Medzhar looks likely to win the election if in fact it takes place. In the polls, he's polling around 48 or 47% compared to 37 or 38% for Fidesz. But what's going to happen when he gets into power? Orban, the system of Orbanization goes back 2010, 2011. Viktor Orban introduced a new constitution, the fundamental law. Which has been a kind of a shield. He's bundled into the constitution all the mechanisms of the autocratic system, illiberal system that he's built. So in order to dismantle that, to change the constitution in Hungary, Petr Medzhar would need a constitutional majority in the parliament. That means 2/3. Viktor Orbán has had constitutional majority for, I think, all of his four terms. It's unlikely that Petr Medzhar will. So he can make the right noises about what he wants to do. He wants to reverse illiberalism. He wants to restore democracy. He wants to fix the problems with rule of law. But he kind of must know that he won't be held to that because he won't have the constitutional majority. That's very convenient for him because he can go to the European Union and make those declarations with the hope of releasing I think the 19 billion euros that have been held back from Hungary because of Article 7 and the rule of law issues. And he's seen how, for example, in Poland, when Donald Tusk returned to power, he similarly made the right declarations. But because of the blocking presidency, he hasn't been able to implement the changes, but still that money has started to pour in from Brussels.
So can we see a similar phenomenon, whereas if Medzhar does win the election, would he be able to unblock these funds even if we already foresee some difficulty or at least some speed bump when it comes to really doing away with the system that's being seen as to be against the rule of law for such a long time?
Will he be able to change things? Probably not for the reasons I mentioned, but there's more. There's the Orbanization went into every area where the state can have control. It controls the universities, as we know, and they're put into these kind of private foundations, which are protected by the constitution. They're untouchable. He's created political control of the judiciary. He's changed positions that in many countries tenures of 4 and 5 years. Under his system, it's 10, 11, 12 years. It's going to be very difficult for Medzhar to change anything, even if he wants to, and that's the big question. Does he actually want to change anything?
Right, that's actually a very interesting question that I do want to follow up with because, well, a lot of people are looking at Petr Medzhar and thinking that this is going to be the politicians that's going to bring great change to Hungary. However, we do also know that he did hail from the same party as Orban a while back, and a lot of his rhetoric when it comes to foreign policy or the big picture stuff actually looks eerily similar. Of course, he's opposing Orban with things like corruption and a lot of domestic stuff, but how realistic can we count on Medzhar taking a dramatically different political position as opposed to Orban?
Based on what we know, probably there is not much evidence to see that he's going to be very different. It's very difficult to see what the daylight is in terms of policy and ideology with Viktor Orbán. I talked about the interview he gave in the Financial Times this morning, and he said that he wants to reduce Hungary's dependency on Russian oil and gas, but dependency doesn't mean stop buying, which kind of means continue buying. And also, he said that he won't sell weapons to Ukraine, and he'll allow the Hungarian people to decide on the Hungarian position on Ukraine joining the European Union, probably on the basis that he knows that the balance will be against that. We also saw very interestingly that when there was the huge demonstration against Viktor Orbán's government that took place at the LGBT march, Magyar was very clever in the way that he benefited from the protest, but didn't take part. He didn't align himself with that march, which is seen as a cultural, a left cultural issue. So yeah, it kind of looks that Magyar might continue Orbanism, but without the corruption. At least that's what he says.
Let's go back to the meeting between Orban and Trump. We have a little bit of time. I want to pick your brain on this last thing. We do have another soundbite from Viktor Orban talking about essentially Hungary's Orban as well as Trump being the only pro-peace party in this whole conflict. We do have the soundbite. Let's take a look.
I'm strongly convinced. So the question is whether we Westerners are unified or not. The problem is that the president has huge peace efforts, which are just splendid and very positive for the European continent and all the peoples of Europe. But at the same time, we are not unified because Brussels and the Europeans have a different approach to the war. So the only pro-peace government is the United States government and the small Hungary in Europe anyway. All the other governments prefer to continue the war because many of them think that Ukraine can win on the front line, which is a misunderstanding of the situation. So it's a complicated issue. We will discuss it. It requests not just 2 minutes to respond to your question, but rather than our lecture. Sorry, not to continue more.
So my last question would be, do you think that this stance Orban's taking is genuine? He thinks that if Ukraine does give in to some Russians' demands, or at least not fought back as strong, there would be some sort of peace that's being negotiated? Or do you think he's just taking a more strategic and politically expedient alignment?
I think that his stance is calculated and is always in the interest of Viktor Orbán and his party. Peace, what I have to understand is that he would like to have peace along the lines that exist at the moment. But peace is just another way of giving kind of permission to Russian occupation. And if Russia were to occupy the additional territories that it's demanded, the territories that Ukraine still holds, it means that Russia would impose its occupation on those territories as well. So the peace just means a different form of killing. We've seen how in Lugansk and Donetsk, there are mass graves outside many of the towns. The people associated, that the Russians associate most closely with the Ukrainian government, people working in local authorities, mayors, politicians, people in the fire service, the police, anyone with a connection to the state. Even artists and people in culture using the Ukrainian language are targeted. So the oppression, repression, disappearances, child disappearances, murders would just continue under the guise of peace. So it's not really a peace at all.
All right. So, well, perhaps just like the Hungarian Prime Minister said, this thing is far more complicated, perhaps even more than he's projecting it out to be. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Okay. Yes. And thank you for tuning into this edition of News in Depth. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.